There is a moment in every scam where the victim figures out they have been had. Sometimes it happens immediately, the second the money leaves their hands. Sometimes it takes weeks, months, an entire tournament unfolding in front of them before the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. For the fans of this World Cup, that moment has already arrived. It arrived somewhere between the day they opened a ticket resale app expecting to find a seat for a few $100s, and the day they found themselves staring at a number with four zeros in it for a single ticket to a single group stage match. $5,000, not for the final, not for a semifinal, for a group game. And the question that number forces you to ask is not complicated. It is the same question every victim of every scam eventually asks themselves. How did this happen, and who let it happen on purpose? Let us be precise about what we mean when we say the word scam, because it is a strong word and it deserves to be used carefully rather than thrown around for views. A scam, in its simplest definition, is a scheme that takes money from people under false pretenses, using a structure designed to extract maximum value while giving the appearance of fairness. It does not require a man in a back alley. It does not require fake tickets or forged paperwork. The most effective scams in modern commerce are the ones built entirely on legal infrastructure, hiding inside terms and conditions, dressed up as innovation. Defended by spokespeople who can say with a straight face that nothing improper has occurred. And once you understand that definition, once you strip away the assumption that a scam has to be illegal to be a scam, the ticketing structure built around this World Cup starts to look less like an unfortunate side effect of high demand and more like a system engineered piece by piece to separate real fans from their money while pretending the whole time to be protecting them. Here is how it worked. FIFA introduced something called dynamic pricing for this World Cup, the first time such a model had ever been applied to the tournament. If you are unfamiliar with the term, think about the last time you booked a flight during a school holiday or tried to buy a concert ticket the moment a tour was announced. Dynamic pricing means the price is not fixed, it moves. It climbs as demand rises, in theory falls when interest cools, and is marketed as a fairer system because it lets the market decide value rather than some bureaucrat guessing at a number months in advance. That is the pitch, that is what FIFA told the world when they unveiled this model. A fairer system, a more efficient system, a system that would, supposedly, get more tickets into more hands. What it actually did was remove the one protection that had always existed for ordinary supporters at a World Cup. A fixed ceiling, a known number, a price you could save toward, plan around. And trust would not move beneath your feet while you were trying to find the money. Tickets that opened at $60 in the early sales windows had climbed to $140 by general sale in December. That is already more than double before the tournament had even sold out its initial allocation. Then, as demand proved real and sustained, prices across nearly every match rose again, by an average of 34% above those already inflated numbers. And that is before we even get to the part of the system that turned this from aggressive pricing into something far closer to organized extraction, the resale market. FIFA's own official resale platform, the only legal channel for fans to buy or sell tickets to one another, was launched with no price cap in the United States or Canada. None. No limit on how high a ticket could be relisted for. No protection against a single individual or a coordinated group of buyers. Purchasing large blocks of tickets at the original price and immediately relisting them at whatever number the platform would allow. And the numbers that emerged from that platform did not resemble football tickets, they resembled scalping operations dressed in official branding. The cheapest available ticket for the United States against Paraguay in Los Angeles, one of the most anticipated group stage fixtures of the entire tournament, was listed at $2,735. Not a premium hospitality package, not a seat with a meal included, the cheapest ticket. And in February, months before a single ball had been kicked, a solitary ticket to the final appeared on that same official platform priced at $143,750. Football Supporters Europe, the organization representing fan groups across the continent who have been tracking this exact pattern for the better part of a year, did not hesitate to name what they were seeing. They called the pricing extortionate. They said it would exclude ordinary fans from the tournament their loyalty had helped build. And they attached a number to the scale of what had happened that should stop anyone in their tracks. Ticket prices for this World Cup have risen by roughly 5 times compared to the 2022 tournament in Qatar. 5 times. not adjusted for inflation, not accounting for a slightly larger stadium count or a few more matches added to the format. 5 times the cost for the privilege of watching the same sport played by the same players, in front of the same global audience that has always considered itself the lifeblood of this competition. And here is where the structure of the scam becomes visible, because a five-fold price increase on its own could be explained away as simple market dynamics, however unpopular. What cannot be explained away is what happened next. The Financial Times reported that as many as 180,000 tickets remained unsold across the tournament. 180,000. In a competition that FIFA's own president described in his exact words as facing demand exceeding supply by a factor of 10 or more. Read that contradiction again, slowly, because it is the entire scandal compressed into a single sentence. A tournament with supposedly 10 times more demand than supply, somehow failing to sell 180,000 of its own tickets. Those two facts cannot coexist in any honest version of reality. One of them is true, the other is the story FIFA needed you to believe while the prices climbed. So if demand truly outstrips supply by a factor of 10, where did 180,000 unsold tickets come from? There are only two possible answers to that question, and both of them lead somewhere uncomfortable for FIFA. The first possibility is that Gianni Infantino's claim was simply false. A piece of promotional language designed to justify aggressive pricing by making the tournament sound more desirable than the market was actually showing it to be. The second possibility, and the one that the evidence increasingly supports, is that demand was genuinely enormous. But FIFA priced the tournament so far beyond what real fans could afford that the demand and the actual sales stopped pointing in the same direction. Millions of people wanted to attend this World Cup. Far fewer millions could afford what FIFA decided to charge them, and the gap between those two numbers is not a footnote to this story. It is the story. This is where the word scam stops being rhetorical and starts being structural, because a true scam does not just take more money than something is worth. It takes that money while closing off every reasonable alternative, leaving the victim with the choice between paying the inflated price or losing access entirely. That is precisely what this ticketing system did to ordinary supporters. If you are a fan who saved for years to attend a home World Cup, who built a trip around a tournament you assumed would still have a fixed, knowable cost by the time you needed to book flights and hotels, you did not have the option of waiting for prices to come down. Dynamic pricing does not work that way. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. Which means the system actively punishes patience and rewards only those with either enormous disposable income or the willingness to gamble large sums immediately. That is not a side effect, that is the design, and once tickets entered the resale market, the design became even more aggressive. Because FIFA's platform, the official and supposedly fan-protective channel, applied no price cap in 2 of the 3 host countries, which meant that anyone who managed to secure tickets at the original inflated price had an immediate, legal, FIFA-sanctioned incentive to relist them at whatever multiple the market would bear. There is a term for this in other industries. When a small number of buyers acquire access to a limited resource specifically to resell it at a markup, with no limit imposed by the platform facilitating the transaction. That behavior is usually called scalping, and in most countries for most events. Governments have stepped in over the years to regulate it precisely because it harms the people the event is supposedly for. FIFA built a resale system with none of those protections on its own platform under its own branding, and then collected a transaction fee on every single one of those inflated resales. The organization that claims to be protecting fans from scalpers is, by the structure of its own marketplace, profiting from scalping every time it happens. Now consider the timing of all of this against the backdrop of what FIFA itself has said about its finances. This is not a side issue. This is the engine underneath everything we have described so far. FIFA's ticketing revenue for the 2026 World Cup has already reached the highest level in the tournament's history, representing a larger proportion of total revenue than any previous edition of the competition. 6 million tickets sold, according to Infantino's own figures, at average prices that dwarf anything fans paid in 2018 or 2022. The organization that insists, in nearly every public statement it makes, that it operates as a nonprofit, redistributing revenue back into the sport for the benefit of football's global development, has constructed a pricing and resale system that generates more direct income from ticketing than it ever has before, while simultaneously producing the most visible, Camera documented evidence of fan exclusion the tournament has seen in decades. This is where the story stops being about ticket prices and becomes about who this World Cup is actually for. Because every public statement FIFA has made about this tournament, every promotional campaign, every speech about football's power to unite the world, every appeal to history and legacy and the dream of attending a World Cup in your own country has been built on the premise that this event belongs to the fans. That is the entire emotional foundation FIFA sells to broadcasters, sponsors, and supporters alike. The World Cup is for everyone. It is the people's tournament. And then, behind that messaging, a pricing structure was quietly built that priced a group stage ticket above $5,000. That listed a final ticket above $140,000, and that left 180,000 seats unsold, while genuine fans were priced out of a tournament their taxes, in many cases, helped fund through public infrastructure spending in host cities. The fans were not an oversight in this system. They were the targets of it, the population this entire pricing model was designed to extract maximum value from, dressed in the language of fairness and demand. And here is the detail that turns frustration into something closer to anger. The detail that makes this feel less like aggressive capitalism and more like an actual scam against the people who made the sport what it is. Reports have surfaced, supported by visible evidence on FIFA's own resale platform, that tickets which went unsold through official channels began quietly appearing on that same resale marketplace, priced even higher than their original cost. Tickets that nobody bought at the official price somehow found their way onto the secondary market, where FIFA's own no-cap pricing model allowed them to be relisted at multiples of their original value. If that pattern holds, and the early evidence strongly suggests it does, then the organization that priced ordinary fans out of the primary market may also be the entity profiting from reselling the inventory it could not move the first time on a platform it owns, collecting a fee on the markup it created. That is not a fan-first ticketing system experiencing unfortunate friction. That is a closed loop designed to monetize scarcity that FIFA itself manufactured. So let us return to where this story began, because the full picture is now in front of us, and it deserves to be stated plainly rather than buried in qualifiers. A World Cup that its own president described as facing demand exceeding supply by a factor of 10 or more left 180,000 tickets unsold. A tournament built on the promise of belonging to ordinary fans introduced a pricing model with no upper limit. Watch prices rise by an average of 34% above already inflated rates, and allowed resale values to climb past $5,000 for a single group stage match and past $140,000 for a seat at the final. An organization that insists, in nearly every public statement, that it exists as a nonprofit dedicated to growing the game generated the highest ticketing revenue in the competition's history while doing so. And tickets that went unsold at the official price reappeared on FIFA's own resale platform at multiples of that price, on a marketplace with no cap, collecting a transaction fee with every relisting. None of these facts exist in isolation. Each one explains the one before it, and together they form a structure, not an accident. This is the part of the story where it would be easy to simply be angry and stop there, to let the outrage sit on the surface and move on to the next headline. But anger without understanding rarely changes anything, and the people who built this system are counting on outrage burning out before it becomes informed enough to demand a different outcome. So let us be specific about what should actually happen next, because there is a version of this tournament that is still possible even now, even after everything that has already gone wrong in its opening days. FIFA could introduce a price cap on its own resale platform immediately, retroactively, for every remaining match in the tournament. This is not a hypothetical regulatory hurdle requiring new legislation or international cooperation. It is a setting on a website that FIFA itself controls. The technology to cap resale prices at a fixed percentage above face value already exists, has already been used by other major sporting organizations, and could be implemented within days if FIFA decided that protecting fans mattered more than protecting a revenue stream built on scarcity. The fact that this has not happened, despite the public outrage, despite the empty seats already visible on broadcast television, despite football supporters Europe explicitly calling the situation extortionate, tells you everything about where FIFA's priorities currently sit. This is a choice being actively renewed every single day the cap remains absent, not a problem FIFA has been unable to solve. FIFA could also release a portion of the unsold inventory, the 180,000 tickets the Financial Times identified, at significantly reduced prices through verified fan channels. Prioritizing local supporters in host cities and members of official fan associations over corporate buyers and resale speculators. Other major tournaments have done exactly this when faced with the embarrassment of empty stadiums, because a half-full venue on live television is a worse outcome in pure reputational terms than discounting tickets at the final hour. The fact that FIFA has not done this either, even after the images from Guadalajara circulated across every football media outlet in the world, suggests that the optics of empty seats are not yet costing the organization enough to outweigh the revenue those high prices continue to generate from the buyers who remain. And this is ultimately the truest, most uncomfortable insight buried inside this entire story. FIFA does not need every seat filled to consider this tournament a financial success. The revenue model has already worked. 6 million tickets sold at the highest average price in the competition's history means the targets have been met regardless of what the cameras find in any individual stadium on any individual match day. Empty seats are a public relations problem for FIFA, not a financial one, and the gap between those two categories explains every decision the organization has made since the scandal broke. A public relations problem gets a carefully worded statement. A financial problem gets an emergency policy change. FIFA has so far only treated this as the former. Which brings us to what real fans, the people this tournament was always supposed to belong to, can actually do in response to a system built this way. The instinct, understandably, is to feel powerless against an organization with FIFA's scale and resources. But visibility has already proven to be the one thing that genuinely unsettles this institution. The empty seats in Guadalajara would have remained an internal footnote if cameras had not broadcast them to a global audience within hours of kickoff. The $5,000 group stage ticket would have stayed buried in a resale listing if nobody had pulled the screenshot and put a number on the scale of the problem. Every piece of this story that has reached the public has reached it because someone documented it, shared it, and refused to let FIFA's official statement be the last word on what actually happened. That remains true for the rest of this tournament. Every empty section the cameras find in the coming weeks, every screenshot of an inflated resale price, every contradiction between what FIFA claims and what the broadcast shows, adds another data point to a case that grows harder for FIFA to wave away with a statement about fans standing in concourses. The World Cup does not belong to a pricing algorithm. It does not belong to a resale platform engineered to extract maximum value from scarcity that the organization itself created. It belongs, or it is supposed to belong, to the people who have loved this sport long before FIFA discovered dynamic pricing, and will love it long after this particular scandal fades from the headlines. The question this tournament now has to answer match by match, stadium by stadium for the next 6 weeks is whether FIFA still believes that, or whether the $5,000 ticket was always the real intention, dressed up in the language of unprecedented demand. The cameras are still rolling, the resale platform is still live, and every fan who could not afford to be in those seats is still watching, waiting to see which version of this tournament FIFA actually chooses to build.